From time to time at our regular Friday meetings, we're going to have brief reports from some of our standing committees on their activities. As you know, our standing committees are the eyes and ears of the club that keep track of particular subject matter and keep the board and the research board advised of what needs to be done in the way of attention of the club toward civic issues. We have a number of standing committees dealing with different subjects, and the one that will report today is the Committee on Business and Labor. Chairman of the committee is Ron Atwood, an attorney with Rankin McMurray, and he will make a brief presentation on the activities of that committee. Ron?
When they asked me to do this 3 weeks ago, I didn't know I was going to be the guinea pig. I do enjoy the opportunity to tell you what we're going to do. It's not often we have the chance to brag about ourselves, so I'm going to take the most of the opportunity. I took over in January from Barbara Clark. Many of the things that I'll talk about today we began working on when she was chair during the previous year of 1985. She left as chair to pursue a political campaign, and she's here today, and if you want to talk to her about that, I'm sure she'll be more than willing to talk to you. We focused on two issues this year. The first is labor relations. We began the year with a Second Wednesday program in January that focused on the future of labor unions. We featured 3 statewide labor leaders. The program was moderated by one of our committee members, Fred Haler. The program was put together and chaired by Craig Crispin. We are beginning a look at workers' compensation. We will have our April meeting next Monday, and we will feature Steve Sokach, who is the chief lobbyist for the Oregon AFL-CIO. Next month in May, we hope to have the lobbyist from Associated Oregon Industries, and in June, we will have a national labor leader at a special seminar for the Business and Labor Committee members. We are also working in the area of economic development. We have a program that's scheduled right now for December. We want to look how to facilitate Oregon companies that have been here, not focusing necessarily on new companies, but those who are here and what we either as a state or as individuals can do to foster them. That committee is chaired by Gail Pemble. We're beginning a look at youth unemployment, and we're going to begin that discussion also on Monday. That committee is chaired by John Rakowitz. Your program today began as an idea that we batted around last summer. It was approved by the program committee last August or September. It was then given to Dick Tracy to corral all the speakers, and Mr. Bolender is here as that result. Thank you for the opportunity to be in here, and hope you enjoy the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. I should add that from time to time there are vacancies on the various standing committees, and if you're interested in serving on any one of them, let the office know. It's nice to have a backlog of people who are interested. Our board host today is John Frohnmeyer, who will have the privilege of asking the first question of our speaker of the day. As Ron mentioned, this is the third in a series of City Club programs dealing with one of the club's premier issues, which is economic development. The series has been coordinated by our Standing Committee on Business and Labor, and it's been entitled, quote, Made in U.S.A., Jobs in Oregon, end quote. The series deals generally with the broad topic of quality, productivity, and international markets, and more particularly with how Oregon businesses are meeting the challenge of increased global competitiveness. The first speaker in the series was Wim Velsink of Tektronix, who discussed the general subject of competitiveness from international, national, and local perspectives. The second speaker was Tom Berger of Mentor Graphics, who told us how a small local company can make good in the big time. And today's speaker will be Dave Bolender, president of Pacific Power and Light Company, who will discuss, among other things, the utilization of new management methods and techniques in order to remain competitive in today's environment. Mr. Bolender is a graduate of the Colorado School of Mines. He worked for General Electric and Westinghouse, and he came to Pacific Power and Light in 1975 as manager of power generating plants under construction. He was elected a vice president in 1976, a senior vice president in 1980, and executive vice president in 82. A year later, he became president of Pacific Power and Light, which is the electrical operations subsidiary of Pacific Corp, a diversified energy services company. Mr. Bolender is active in community affairs and currently serves as president of the Portland Chamber of Commerce, which shares with the City Club the common objective of trying to make Portland a better place in which to live and work. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Dave Bolender.
Let's see if I can make this thing go over the top. As president of the Chamber of Commerce, I wish that we could get this kind of turnout for some of our meetings. I think you do a marvelous job in this club, and I will be studying some of your methods to see if they're not applicable to infusing a little more life in the chamber. It is a pleasure for me to speak to you this afternoon and to be part of the series on jobs in Oregon. To my mind, this group certainly has become the foremost public forum group in Oregon. And while I was preparing for today and thinking about competition and in the job market, I was reminded of an incident involving a couple of my competitors. And I will interrupt this speech a few times to make an apology to people that I didn't expect to be here, but which I've seen here. I'm going to tell a little story about my competitors, and I want you to know Jim Stever is not included in this unnamed group of people I'll talk about. Utility people once in a while get thrown in front of a camera or a microphone, and we need training and retraining in this art, and it is an art. So I found myself recently in a public speaking refresher seminar. And there were two other heads of Portland-based utilities who shall remain nameless. During the seminar, one of these two gents was asked to get up and give an impromptu speech on a subject that was to be picked out of a hat. And when he picked his out of the hat, of course, it was the topic was sex. He had to talk about it 3 minutes. Well, the guy did a tremendous job, outstanding, and he kind of knew he'd done a good job. He went home and he told his wife how well he'd done, but he was a little embarrassed to say he'd talked about sex. So he told her the topic was sailing. And that night at a little graduation get-together for everybody in the seminar, I went up to the wife of this unnamed Portland-based utility executive and I said, "Boy, your husband sure did a great job with his speech today." And his wife said to me, "Yes, he told me he thought he'd done well." "I was a little surprised," she said. "It isn't a topic he knows very much about." "Why, he's only done it twice." The first time he got sick, and the second time it blew his hat off. Like I say, I've got a couple other of those that I'm going to have to be a little careful of. Now, you may be wondering why the president of an electric utility is here to talk about competition and changes in job methods. Believe it or not, it is a subject that I know a little bit about. The two other Portland-based utilities that I've already mentioned are a part of my competition, but they're only a part. Most people think utilities like Pacific Power are insulated from competition. After all, we have franchised service territories, guaranteed customers, and how else are you going to turn on your lights or run your hair dryers unless it's by using electricity? But the truth is we are not insulated from competition. In fact, competition is the #1 challenge in our industry today. It's turning our business upside down, and it's forcing us to think and to operate in new ways. Today I'd like to tell you a little bit about how we are changing or trying to change at Pacific Power, and then I want to talk about Oregon and how I think we need to change as a state. Here's another one I'm going to have to correct here. Up until the 1970s, I say, Pacific Power was on pretty safe ground. We had a simple, straightforward task, and that was to provide electricity to our customers. I see an old retiree of ours down here, Bob Burke, who might disagree with that statement. But Bob, it's all relative. It's harder today. We didn't have to worry too much about differences between customers or how they used our product. We put a black Cadillac in every garage, same high quality, same color, same size, and same shape of electricity for everybody. Our business grew out automatically as the regional economy and the population in the region grew. And we just hummed along, building generation when it was needed and recovering our costs. And it was a good and stable business. In those days when people joined the company, they felt pretty confident that they'd be there until retirement if they did a reasonably good job. And then a few things hit us like a number of shock waves. The Arab oil embargo, soaring inflation, and projected power shortages. We began building more power plants to meet our projected demand, while our construction costs skyrocketed. Our customers were hit with high and repeated price increases, and over time they got mad as hell. They told us they weren't going to take it anymore. Some began conserving with a vengeance, others sought other energy options. The recession hit us in the late 70s like everybody else. It hit especially hard in the Pacific Northwest. And as a result of the downturn, this region now has enough power to last at least until the middle 1990s, and I think well beyond then. And there is more competition today among energy suppliers for what business does exist. There are also more energy suppliers in the marketplace than ever before. So while customers are getting more interested in exploring new energy choices, they are finding that there are also more choices available to them. Pacific's old rivals, particularly gas, oil, and public power, have stepped up their campaigns to win our customers. You've all witnessed the heavy advertising by the gas company recently. With oil prices dropping much farther and much faster than we predicted, the competition in the near term at least from both natural gas and oil is going to be tough for us. We also face competition from other emerging new technologies like solar, wind, photovoltaics, and fuel cells. Some people say that in the energy world of tomorrow, we will each get our electricity from a little black box on our roof or in our basement. And if that happens, we at Pacific Power want to know the most about and be the best providers of those little black boxes. A more immediate competitor for us is cogeneration. It's catching on like wildfire across this country, with industrial users burning everything from sunflower hulls to peach pits or cow manure to generate their own electricity. Now today, cogeneration only accounts for about 2 to 3% of the nation's total output of energy. But federal officials predict, if you believe federal officials, as much as a five-fold increase by the end of the century, and that would be a very, very significant growth. Our strategy with cogeneration is to embrace it rather than to fight it. We're willing to work with industrial users to help them plan, develop, and operate their own cogeneration facilities. We've even formed a joint venture with NERCO to market cogeneration services. We also face competition from energy management systems and energy-efficient products. There was a time when companies like GE and Westinghouse that I used to work for sold products that would increase the use of electricity, and we were good friends of the utilities. Today, they're doing just the opposite of that. They're selling energy-efficient products specifically designed to use less electricity. Today's consumers want and are demanding energy efficiency, and they want control over their energy bill. And the technology is nearly here to give them that control. In New York today, some residents now have meters that tell them how much power they're using during the day and when it costs the most and the least. In Roswell, Georgia, there's a test going on of a metering system that programs thermostat settings and energy use based on the price at the time of the day. And customers can call up their current energy usage on their TV screen anytime they want. It's a new world. The energy industry is busting wide open, and although Pacific is still a regulated business, the regulators no longer hold exclusive rule. I hope none of them are here today. More and more, it is the marketplace that is shaping energy prices and products, and the customer truly is king. We're changing our entire orientation in the company from what some would say was a centralized, monolithic, production-driven bureaucracy to, we hope, a dynamic, competitive, market-driven, and customer-oriented business. We've decentralized operations to give more decision-making authority to the people working closest to the customers. We've done extensive surveys. What do our customers want? What are we doing right or wrong? And we've launched new programs to encourage our employees to contribute their ideas for improving productivity and customer service. Our employees know things are changing for us. They know that we have to watch our spending, put our dollars where they'll help us the most, and operate as a lean, tough, competitive company. They also know they must be effective in helping the company succeed if they want to succeed. Now, after all that, many of our customers still say we're a centralized, monolithic, production-driven bureaucracy. So we know we're not there yet, but we're trying. How's a gas company employee that just laughed back there? To guide us through our process of change, we've relied on a strategic planning process, and it has helped us figure out where we want to go and how we might get there, a planning path, if you will, to get there. We started by thoroughly evaluating what was happening to us in our industry and in the energy marketplace. And then we assessed what options, the few options that were available to us. We examined who our customers are, where our markets are, what we do well, what we can do better, and what we need to change. And we have emerged from that continuing strategic planning process with a strong commitment to growth. In these surplus times, that means benefits to both the customers and to our shareholders. We've also emerged with a commitment to find new and better ways to meet our customers' needs. For perhaps the first time, we're seeing our customers as specific individuals with specific needs, instead of a mass of people which we used to call our so-called system load. We're beginning to work with customers one-on-one to customize energy pricing and supply packages to meet their specific needs within our regulated authority, but those regulations are indeed changing. For many years, we were trying to minimize the number of rate classifications. Now we're doing just the opposite. We're exploring a broad range of rate possibilities to meet individual needs. A lot of our emphasis right now is in the industrial sector, and we're still not moving as swiftly as our industrial customers would like. Similarly, we're working with commercial customers to help them identify how they can use energy more efficiently and then make the necessary changes to reduce their cost. One of the primary ways that we're pursuing growth is through economic development. And this is a real win-win situation. Whenever we increase economic growth, wherever it is in our service territory, it increases our own business. We've made a broad-based commitment, therefore, to economic development. We're working with local communities to help them build and market their strengths. We're working with existing businesses to help them survive and expand. And we're working with new business and industry to assess sites in our region. We've been reaching out to companies across the country and into the Pacific Rim as well to get them interested in the Pacific Northwest. If they do decide to locate here, we offer help in getting through the permitting processes, working with local authorities, and in some cases we have been providing financial backing. Now, our economic development efforts at Pacific Power are just beginning to pay off, we think. But there is much, much more to be done, and we are vitally concerned with the state of Oregon's economy. So let me switch to that for a minute, the state of Oregon's economy. Pacific's Economic Development Department has done a thorough analysis of the state and regional economy, as have many others. And the findings, not surprisingly, are in line with what you've been hearing from others. The timber industry has recovered somewhat, but will never again see a return to the employment levels of the late 70s. There is not going to be much growth in agriculture over the long term. Tourism holds promise only if we as a state can learn to package our assets better and to market them more globally. High tech is the fourth leg of the stool for us, and despite the current shakeout in the chip industry, there is room for growth in the Silicon Forest. But in the same way that Pacific Power has had to shift from being internally system-oriented to being market-oriented, the state of Oregon and those of us who live here and do business here must become more market-oriented. If we keep operating our state and local governments in the old traditional ways, we may never find our niche in the global economy, nor will we achieve the growth that I think we want, that we say we want. It's time for the state and local governments to look at a restructuring, to change their operations in order to be more efficient, more aggressive, and more competitive in the world marketplace. A simplification of structure like this city club came up with in proposing a single county for this metropolitan area is a tremendous idea. Exactly the kind of innovative thinking that I think is necessary to move this state. Somehow we've got to lower the overall costs of doing business, and that appears to be a marvelous idea to me. Here's another one of these where I'm going to have to say, Ned, I didn't think you were going to be here today. I was talking to Ned Look at the Oregon Business Council the other night about your county proposal and how much I liked it, and I mentioned that it would be difficult and it was going to take some time to do. And Ned looked at me sternly and he said, Dave, when I go to the store, I'm now old enough that I only buy ripe bananas. I don't have time to wait. We need to do it now. And I agree with Ned. We need to figure out the very specific areas where we can change rapidly and concentrate on those areas to specialize or to prioritize our most important issues, if you will. We cannot fund an educational system in this state that is top of the line in every field, but we may be able to develop the best center in the nation for some specific kind of industrial or medical research. You've heard others talk about the need for a strong infrastructure in Oregon to support growth. A balanced tax structure, adequate tax bases for our school districts, adequate jail space, streamlined permitting processes, good transportation services, and so on and so on and so on. We cannot do them all. This state has limited resources. We need to pick a few of the most important ones and to push them hard. In addition to specializing or prioritizing our efforts, I would only add the importance of attitude, showing through our actions that we do indeed welcome business in this state. It's that external orientation that I was talking about. It's certainly not enough to put up billboards that say Oregon, open for business. Look at the Fred Meyer case. One of the strongest Oregon-based companies in our region, one of the most supportive and involved companies in our community. Fred Meyer is embroiled in a major battle because it wants to open a new store in Northeast Portland. It's being hit with increased costs, delays, and mounting public controversy. Now, what kind of a message does that put out there to the outside world about our city as a place to do business? Surely there are ways the neighborhood people and Fred Meyer can work out a compromise that's in the best interests of our local economy. I think we must show a willingness to work with business and to promote growth, and it has to be on a consistent basis or we ain't going to get there. This year the state will elect new political leadership, but just as important is civic leadership. We need organizations like this City Club, companies like Pacific Power, and certainly business advocacy groups like the Oregon Business Council and the Portland Chamber of Commerce. And all those groups have to cooperate in the economic development efforts. We need to concentrate our efforts on those few truly most important areas where our limited funding will do the most good, and I don't think we're doing that now. There is some movement in that direction. The Oregon Business Council, for example, is designing its programs to concentrate on just 5 areas: taxes, timber, agriculture, small community economic development, and education. I'm familiar with a few of the areas that the City Club has been concentrating on. One I've already mentioned, the single county idea. Second, your central city plan. Third, Ogden Beeman's task force on economic development, and Leonard Gerard's task force on burglary or crime. Let's make sure that we put other groups' efforts together with those items because they're all good projects. To make satisfactory progress in these areas, these most important areas, will require efficient use of all of Oregon's resources. And it may mean a total reorientation of certain sectors in state and local governments as well as in companies like mine. A major change from looking at what we've always done and what we've always been in the past. In today's economy, the competition for business is very, very stiff. But as old Yogi Berra once put it, it ain't over till it's over. We're still in the ball game, and I really do salute your City Club efforts to keep us in that game. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dave, and also thanks to our Standing Committee on Business and Labor that helped to arrange this type of program. We're now ready for questions from the audience, and the privilege of asking the first question goes to our board host, John Frohnmeyer.
My question has to do with planning, and that is, supposing that the state of Oregon does get its act together and get some focus on tourism, and tourism does become a growth industry in Oregon, how does PP&L or any other utility plan for a vastly increased tourist business in the state of Oregon?
We planned for a vastly improved tourism business in Oregon 20 years ago, and we're living with not getting it for the last 10. So I can guarantee that we, without building anything else as far as electrical generating capability, that we will be able to handle anything you can throw at us in the way of growth around the state. If and when that fortunate day occurs when we've used up the surplus in the whole state, we lean towards building new facilities that are involved in the cogeneration area. There is a much higher efficiency with cogeneration and much higher benefits. So we do not see, At least today, we do not see the return to building large central power stations and then moving the power long distances to the load.
We're now ready for additional questions. There's a microphone in the middle of the floor, and I'll ask that you use it so the radio audience can hear the questions. The privilege of asking questions is limited to City Club members, and would you please identify yourself when you start to ask the question?
Mr. Bolender, Ed Finkley. I'm the chairman of the City Club's Energy Subcommittee, and our subcommittee's question is, for the consumers in the Pacific Northwest, the rapid drop in oil prices is obviously good news at the gas pump. What are the implications of this current very rapid drop in oil prices to electric consumers, and in particular, what are the implications to the Northwest electric energy utility strategy of selling surplus power to California?
Okay, Ed, certainly we foresaw some effects of declining oil and gas prices, and we had in our future scenarios taken a look at oil as low as $20 a barrel, and decided there wasn't going to be that great an effect. We did not look carefully at $10 a barrel oil. And we have found that on the utilities, the second part of your question, on utilities, there has been a very definite effect in the negative direction on not only electric but on the gas utilities. In the case of our electric utility, there have been two major effects. We do quite a bit of business in the state of Wyoming, and over there the closing in of wells has directly meant less pumping load and therefore less energy sales from us directly to a customer. In addition to that, the wholesale market that you mentioned has really gone south. It usually does, but in this case, in all meanings of the phrase, we are not seeing the California market that we usually see at this time of the year because of the runoff. There generally is a significant amount of hydro that goes down there at a fairly low price anyway, but we do not expect the second half of the year, when low-cost hydro is not available from the Northwest and when we usually sell large quantities of coal-fired generation all the way from Wyoming and move it all the way into California. We do not expect that either the volume of sales this year or the price that we might get for those sales will, we know, be lower. How long that will go on, I think, is a very direct outcome of what does happen to oil and gas prices. The Californians today, it appears, can burn oil and gas as cheap as they can get electricity from the Northwest, and they're going to do that first. As far as consumers are concerned, we have been on a stabilization. I think we've pushed you about as far as we're going to push, and we see some loss of market share as people find ways to heat their houses with wood or do some other kind of an option that gives them the kind of choice that they want. We have been on a program of stabilization of our prices for over a year now. We think that we will be able to maintain our price levels at or below the rate of inflation for the next several years, and hope that we will be able to maintain our customers with that kind of price treatment. I do not see oil and gas lower prices making much difference in your electricity bills in the Northwest because we don't get much of our generation.
Mr. Bolender,
Somebody doesn't believe me.
Steve Shell, member. What would the consequences of a sale of the Bonneville assets be to PP&L and to us as consumers in the Northwest?
Well, how long you got? That's a very, very complex question and a very difficult one to answer. I personally believe in defederalizing, if you will, as many things as we possibly could defederalize. However, in the case of Bonneville, there are so many contracts, treaties, agreements, and the Northwest economy for large segments of people and industries is so dependent upon Bonneville prices that I think that we must go into that one very, very carefully and to analyze it very carefully before we jump into that. I believe that if it were sold somehow, it would depend to whom and it would depend how it was managed afterwards. The system doesn't work too badly right now, except that you know that you and I as taxpayers in the state of Oregon and for the country are subsidizing the public power people through the federal system. So it's not the fairest system, but it does work. If we change it, I'm a proponent that we must change it very slowly and very carefully.
Jeannie Dodson-Edgar's member, what are the possibilities and consequences of deregulation of electric utilities?
I think they're absolutely coming. How fast, I don't know, but to me it's incomprehensible that it won't come. I think it's more complex than, say, the phone system as far as a deregulation is concerned. I don't mean technically. And I believe it's got more interconnecting complexities than the airlines or some of the other things that have been deregulated. But I certainly think over the next decade or so that we indeed are going to be seeing more and more deregulation. Probably first in transmission, where we may become common carriers like the gas pipelines have already done. Almost certainly in generation, where I think there will be generation companies set up separate from distribution companies, and probably lastly in distribution. But I certainly think it's coming.
John O'Brien, member. I'd like to ask you a question more on the community experiences you've had. How much of a emphasis do you believe in economic development ought to be given to supporting private investment in fledgling corporations versus encouraging public investment in facilities such as, say, the proposed convention center or other similar developments?
Certainly both have their place. I'm a pusher of the convention center on the one hand. On the other side, as a member of the Economic Development Council, I got on that commission last fall, and I thought we were going to have a significant amount of money to try to do just what you're talking about, and that is to assist new or incubating businesses in the private sector in doing their own growing. As you know, the lottery has not provided the amount of money for economic development that we thought it was going to, and there were certain commitments by the legislature that were made for rather large sums of money at the beginning, so we really haven't had much to dole out. But I think the best possible way to grow businesses is certainly in the private sector from incubation.
Jim Lehman, member. My question was almost the same. I might continue by asking, do you have in place or a proposal for considerably lower electric rates for fledgling companies, at least like for the first 1 to 3 years?
You bet. We will talk, anybody that is going to start up a new business or expand a business that means additional use of electricity is good business for us in the way of incremental pricing. Good for our current shareholders, good for our current customers as well as our current shareholders. And we will work with you to try to do anything possible to help in the way of energy costs in making your business a success. One thing that has to be carefully watched is at the same time we cannot, where you are directly competing with another one of the industries in the Northwest, it has to be carefully watched that we are treating other customers similarly, so we don't get into an assistance in taking business away from somebody else. So we look for new growth in the area in a region that is not directly cutting somebody else out of business.
Mr. Bolender, Bill Long, City Club member, you intimated in your remarks that the change that PP&L has gone through in the last several years from a more static bureaucratic system to a more dynamic business might have lessons in it for the way that governments conduct their business, especially perhaps city or state government. Would you expand on those comments about the way that your lessons might be applicable to those in public government?
Yeah, what I was referring to is that I think that we have changed the organization of the company a great deal. There's a whole bunch of employees here that might say we've gone the wrong direction in certain areas. But I believe the state, in order to make a significant reduction in the cost of how we run government in this state, we've got to do some significant restructuring. And what I was referring to there is that I think in government we need to look at whole departments that were set up for particular reasons that may, because of time or Lord knows what, are no longer effective or needed, or there are cheaper ways to get that service someplace else, and to try to do some restructuring such that that elimination of governmental groups in the state government would make a significant drop in total cost of running the government for the state.
Joseph, parent, member, I expect you'll give me a very short answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Is there any future at all for nuclear-generated power in the Northwest?
My background is nuclear for both GE and Westinghouse, and I went through several false starts in the nuclear business, and I thought it was a marvelous way to generate electricity, and indeed I think it really is. But to answer the question, I think in our lifetimes, I didn't see how young you were, but in mine at least, I do not think that the public in this country is ready to accept nuclear power. I finally have accepted that, and I think that there is enough surplus power around and enough other energy for us for a long enough time that I do not expect to see nuclear power come back for some time. Maybe someday, but I don't think I'm going to see it.
Charles Davis, member. I wonder, in streamlining government, if you wouldn't agree that the Public Utility Commissioner's Office and the Department of Energy, possibly the Department of Economic Development, might well be scrapped?
Charlie, certainly certainly deregulation makes the one possible, and somehow we've got to make more efficient use of the dollars in the economic development area than we have. I would agree with both of those. I think that the single commissioner concept in Oregon has worked very, very well and has probably maintained lower costs than most other states in that area. However, it's probably reached the end of the line as far as maintaining it. And we are the last state to have single commissioner, and I believe it's probably on the way out, which may mean a little additional cost.
My name is Jace Budlong, a member. My question is dealing with the disaster situation that we get in with an ice storm or a windstorm, and there's been talk about trying to redo our antiquated power lines and go underground. Are there plans that are economically feasible being put in place to lower the chances of problems in the future, and maybe a better battle plan so that we're not lost without power?
Certainly there is room for better battle plans. I do not think that the economy of this region, nor the density of population that exists here, can stand the cost of trying to go from overhead lines to more protected underground systems. However, there certainly are things that we can do and are doing as we learn more about computer systems and modernize our record keeping and our analysis of what's going on out there on our system. There are ways that we can respond faster to ice storm type of disasters. We're not going to get one of those tomorrow, so I'm safe at least until next winter in saying this. But I think you would find us respond quite a bit faster to the next one than we did 2 or 3 years ago. Those are massive undertakings for the utility. One of the things that we do is we start flying in crews immediately. It takes a lot of manpower to put those systems back together, and it doesn't make much sense to the guy that's out on a rural route at the end of a single system, because we try to put back to get the most benefits to the most people as quickly as possible, and therefore some of the people that are on remote feeders can wait a terrifically long time before they get connected up. But we are continually trying to improve our planning for those kinds of disasters, and hopefully we won't have another one for a while. I think we would respond better today than we did 3 or 4 years ago. Not that we responded too badly, Ben.
Dick Wingard, Business and Labor Committee. You alluded earlier to the problem that occurred in the 70s, I guess, when the projections were for a deficit in the power supply situation, and the reverse has occurred and you have a surplus. Could you review for us what occurred to cause that error, if that's the word, and have you made any adjustments to your planning process as a result?
Yes, we certainly have made changes to the planning process, and what happened to us at the time was that we used a extrapolation of predictions that had been followed for 40 years and which were very, very accurate, that we were going to continue to grow in the Northwest at a 6 or 7% per year compounded growth. And when the oil embargo hit, and we were planning all those nuclear plants and other generation facilities that you've heard more about than you ever cared to hear about, were planned on the basis of the continuing growth and the level of sophistication that we were doing in the planning process at that time. Since that time, we have done an enormous amount of work on econometric models and end-use efficiency models, where we now think that we know exactly where people are going to move and how fast the economy is going to go and all that stuff. All it tells us is that we really don't know very much about predicting the future. We are very confident today that in our projections of 1.7 to 2% growth percentage per year, that we will not be overbuilding for a long time. If we grow much faster than that, we think that we have plans that we can take care of fast growth for a while. But I think we were very, very naive in thinking that we could continue to grow at 6 or 7% compounded rates ad nauseum.
Jan Hansen, City Club member and chair of the Standing Committee on Energy and Environment. Could you comment briefly on a couple of things your company is involved in and the way it will impact the Northwest economy? First is the development of the Site C facility in British Columbia, and the second is the changes in public preference, municipal preference in hydro relicensing.
Okay, first on Site C. All Northwesterners like hydro as long as we don't have to dam up any more pretty rivers or affect the fish. Site C in Canada is a very, very good site for a hydro facility. It's way up there someplace, and I mean way up there. And the Canadians have a program of trying to build ahead of their needs in order to keep some of their economy going by providing work for their construction people. And so they are willing to discuss a plant built strictly for export of electricity to the United States of a project like Project C, and to guarantee us some 20 years of use of that facility after it's built before they would try to call back some of the power from that facility. So our interest in looking at Project C is way out there as far as one of the possible projects that we might become involved in based on what we see as timing of the project, our load projections, and the like. In addition to that, the Californians are very, very interested in Project C power such that they can move that power through the Northwest into California. And we are very interested in protecting the type of regional preference that we now have in order to keep our customers' rates as low as possible. We do not want to see existing transmission to California used up where some of our surplus power would not move to California, but perhaps the Canadian power would. So it's a complicated issue, but I think Site C power is a possibility for the longer-term future. Now I've forgotten the other question.
The changes in public preference in hydro relicensing.
Boy, there's another tough one. The public preference, I'm again it. However, I understand where it came from. I also understand that to unweave the tangled web that we've put together in that area is terribly much intermingled with the economy of the Pacific Northwest, and that's part of the Bonneville question also as far as sale or a different method of governing Bonneville. In order to change that system, I think the Northwest economy is fragile enough that even though I'd like to see it done tomorrow and public preference eliminated, I have to be more practical than that and say that anything that's done in that area has to be done over a longer period of time and very, very carefully.
Mr. Bolender, my name is Walter Durham. I'm a member of the City Club. A while ago you mentioned that Oregon is one of the last single commissioner states, and the rating bureaus on utility credits, Standard & Poor's and Moody's and the like, watch and anticipate the future. If we move to a 3 or more member commission and add more red tape to the decision-making process, including, of course, the Citizens Utility Board, it's been estimated that already the impact of this additional red tape, time delays, interest costs represent perhaps 0.25% interest extra cost on the 4 utilities of Oregon. And I know your company works in 5 states, but I just wonder if you know of any studies that have been made as to how much in dollars that's costing utility consumers already.
No, we really haven't made studies on it because it varies so much from commission to commission. I actually think that going to a 3-person commission, for instance, may or may not increase the costs, and as such, I believe the rating agencies would, they have in the past rated on the basis of past performance rather than expected performance, and I believe that our ratings would not change any until it was shown from historical decision-making that there was a pattern that said, boy, something bad has happened in Oregon, in which case they might drop the rating of the commission at that time, and then we could have some cost effects. But I believe that they will give a fair chance to whatever commission structure you have until there is a series of decisions that indicate a trend.
We have time for about one more question.
Worn them out.
Looks like you've answered them all, Dave. Thank you very much. In closing, let me remind you of the Business Week panel next Friday at the Portland Center Red Lion, and the following week, the debate between the Democratic gubernatorial candidates, which will be at the Marriott. We're adjourned.